My name is Margaret Collins. I am 72 years old, retired, widowed, and until recently I believed I was a good mother. Not perfect, not always right, but loving. The day everything changed did not start with drama. There was no shouting, no warning, no storm outside my window. It started with coffee. I was standing alone in my kitchen early that morning, the soft hum of the coffee maker filling the quiet house. Sunlight slipped through the curtains and landed on the small wooden table my husband Richard and I had bought 40 years earlier. Richard had been gone for 3 years. Sometimes I still reached for a second cup out of habit, forgetting there was no one sitting across from me anymore. That morning I felt something rare, excitement. I had been meaning to call my son Daniel all week. Life kept getting in the way, doctor appointments, errands, the slow routines of aging. But that morning, I finally picked up my phone. I only wanted to ask one thing: when is the wedding? Daniel and his fiancée Rachel had been engaged for almost 3 years. They lived together in a small apartment downtown, an apartment I paid for. Every month, without fail, $600 left my account and went into theirs. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was what good mothers did. The phone rang twice before Daniel answered. "Hey, Mom." His voice sounded tight. I smiled anyway. "Good morning, sweetheart." There was a pause. I didn't notice it at first. "So," I said lightly, "have you two finally picked a wedding date?" Silence. Then I heard movement, the sound of the phone shifting hands. Rachel's voice came through instead. "Oh, Margaret," she said cheerfully, "we actually got married yesterday." The words didn't register. "Yesterday?" I repeated. "Yes," she continued, calm and casual, as if she were telling me the weather. "It was very small. We only invited special people." Special people? I stood frozen in my kitchen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Special people. My mind searched for the meaning behind the phrase, for some hidden explanation that would make it hurt less. Daniel still hadn't spoken. I imagined them sitting together on the couch, the same couch I had paid for. I pictured Rachel's legs crossed comfortably, her tone polite but distant. I finally asked, "Daniel?" He cleared his throat. "Yeah, Mom, it was intimate." Intimate. That word joined the other one, stacking neatly on top of my chest. "I see," I said quietly. I didn't ask why I wasn't invited. I didn't ask who was. Because deep down, I already knew. We ended the call quickly. Rachel said she hoped I wasn't upset. Daniel said he'd call me later. Neither of them did. I walked slowly to my bedroom and opened my closet. Hanging at the front was a navy blue dress, still with the tag tucked inside. I had bought it months earlier, $220, telling myself I deserved to look nice at my son's wedding. I ran my fingers along the fabric. I had imagined standing beside Daniel, smiling proudly for photos, introducing myself to Rachel's family as the mother of the groom. Instead, I had been invisible. That night, I made the mistake of opening social media. There it was. Photos. Rachel's parents smiling brightly, her sisters laughing, a table full of food and champagne, and Rachel, glowing in white, wearing a dress I recognized instantly. $900. That was the amount Daniel had asked me for months earlier, calling it an unexpected expense. I had sent it without question. I sat alone in the dark living room, phone in my hand, scrolling slowly. Each photo felt heavier than the last. They hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen not to include me. I didn't cry. Something inside me simply shut down. A week passed. No calls, no apologies. Then my phone rang. I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. Rachel. Her voice was different this time, urgent, pressured. "Margaret," she said, skipping pleasantries, "the rent is overdue. The landlord is threatening eviction. I think you forgot to send the transfer." I stared at the wall in front of me. For 3 years, I had never missed a payment. Not once. "I didn't forget," I said calmly. There was a pause. "Oh," Rachel replied. "Then when can we expect it?" I thought of the dress in my closet, the photos I wasn't in, the word special. "Rachel," I said slowly, "do you remember what you told me?" She laughed lightly. "Told you what? That only special people were invited to the wedding?" Silence. "I understand. I just wanted to be clear." Another pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, my voice steady, "I only help special people." The line went dead. That night, for the first time, I added everything up. Rent, furniture, groceries, medical bills, car repairs, gifts, emergency money. $36,000. Money my husband had left so I could live comfortably in my old age. Money I had spent trying to stay relevant in my son's life. The next morning, I put on my coat and drove to the bank. I canceled every automatic payment. I changed passwords. I removed access. I signed papers with shaking hands, not from fear, but from relief. The bank manager asked gently, "Is everything okay, Mrs. Collins?" I smiled for the first time in days. "Yes," I said, "it finally is." What I didn't know yet was that cutting off the money would cost me far more than I expected, because when people stop seeing you as a wallet, they show you exactly who they are. The first knock came 3 days after I cut off the payments. It was loud, sharp, angry. I was sitting in my living room with a book I hadn't actually been reading for 10 minutes, staring at the same sentence over and over. My body knew before my mind did. Daniel. I stood slowly, my knees stiff, my heart steady in a way that surprised me. When I opened the door, my son was there, eyes red, jaw tight, and behind him stood Rachel, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. They didn't say hello. "Mom," Daniel said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation, "what the hell is going on?" Rachel followed him in, scanning my living room like she was assessing inventory. I closed the door carefully. "What do you mean?" I asked. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "The rent didn't go through. The credit card payment bounced. Rachel's account is overdrawn." I nodded. "Yes." Rachel scoffed. "You said you forgot. You didn't say you were cutting us off." "I didn't forget. I decided." Daniel stared at me like he didn't recognize me. "You can't just decide that. We depend on that money." There it was. Not "we need help," not "we're struggling." We depend on it. Rachel finally spoke. "This is incredibly selfish, Margaret." I raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" "Yes," she snapped. "You know we're just starting out. You know how hard things are right now." I gestured around my home. "And you know I'm 72 years old." Daniel sighed dramatically. "Mom, don't do this. Don't make this about age." "Then what should I make it about? Respect?" Rachel laughed, short and sharp. "You weren't disrespected." I walked to the side table and picked up a framed photo. Daniel at 10 years old, missing 2 front teeth, arms wrapped around my legs. "Was I invited to your wedding?" Daniel looked away. Rachel answered. "We already explained that." "You explained that only special people were invited," I said evenly. Rachel rolled her eyes. "That doesn't mean you're not special." I met her gaze. "Then why wasn't I there?" Silence. Daniel stepped forward. "Mom, you're twisting things. You're emotional." I felt something shift inside me. Emotional. That word had followed me my entire life, used to dismiss, to silence, to minimize. "I'm not emotional. I'm aware." Rachel crossed her arms tighter. "So what? This is punishment? Because if that's what this is, it's cruel." I set the photo back down. "This isn't punishment. It's boundaries." Daniel scoffed. "Since when do you have boundaries?" That one hurt. Because he was right. I never had. They stayed for nearly an hour, trying everything. Daniel pleaded, Rachel reasoned, then they both accused. They told me I was abandoning them. They reminded me how much I owed Daniel for raising him. They implied I would regret this. Finally, Rachel leaned forward, lowering her voice. You know, she said slowly, people your age don't always think clearly. The air changed. Daniel froze. What do you mean? I asked. Rachel shrugged. I'm just saying, sudden financial decisions, mood changes, memory lapses, doctors take that seriously. Daniel swallowed. Rachel? She ignored him. We're just worried about you. I looked at my son. He didn't defend me. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, my phone rang at 9:14 a.m., a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Collins, a woman said politely, this is Adult Protective Services. We've received a report concerning your well-being. I sat down slowly. A report? I repeated. Yes, she continued. Concerns about cognitive decline and possible financial mismanagement. I knew immediately. I cooperated fully. I answered questions. I scheduled evaluations. I smiled when necessary. Because I had nothing to hide. A week later, Daniel called. Mom, he said softly, we just want to help. You filed a report against me, I replied. We were advised to, Rachel's voice cut in from the background. It's for your own good. I closed my eyes. For my own good, I repeated. 2 days after that, a letter arrived. Legal letterhead. Petition for guardianship. They were trying to take control of my finances, my house, my life. I sat at my dining table, the same one Richard and I had eaten at for decades, and read every word carefully. Then I did something I had never done before. I called a lawyer. The courtroom smelled like old paper and polished wood. Daniel wouldn't look at me. Rachel sat beside him, her hand gripping his arm like a leash. The judge listened patiently as their attorney spoke about concern, vulnerability, protection. Then my attorney stood. He didn't raise his voice. He simply laid out facts. Bank records, medical evaluations, witness statements. Doctors testified that I was mentally sound. Friends spoke about my independence. Financial advisors confirmed responsible decision-making. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was firm. Mrs. Collins, do you understand the nature of these proceedings? Yes, I replied. And do you wish to continue managing your own affairs? Yes, I said again, louder. The judge nodded. This court finds no evidence of incapacity, she declared. Petition denied. Rachel gasped. Daniel's shoulders slumped. The judge looked directly at them. Concern does not grant control, she added. This matter is closed. I walked out of that courtroom alone and stronger than I had ever felt. That evening, I changed my locks. I installed security cameras. I updated my will. Then I sat on my porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, realizing something terrifying and freeing at the same time. I no longer had a son who loved me. I had a son who wanted access, and when that access was denied, he showed his true face. The first thing I learned after the court case was this: winning does not mean peace. It means retaliation. For a few quiet days after the judge denied the guardianship petition, my phone stayed silent. No calls, no messages, no surprise visits. I allowed myself to believe, briefly, that Daniel and Rachel had finally understood. That belief lasted exactly 4 days. On the 5th morning, I went to the grocery store and found my debit card declined. I tried again. Declined. My chest tightened. The cashier gave me an apologetic smile. Sometimes the system glitches, she said. I nodded, embarrassed, paid with cash, and drove straight to the bank. The young man at the counter frowned as he typed. Your account is temporarily restricted, Mrs. Collins. Restricted? I repeated. Yes, there's a hold pending verification. Verification of what? He hesitated. A report of suspicious activity. I felt cold all over. An hour later, sitting in a glass-walled office, I heard the truth. Daniel had called my bank. He had claimed I was being manipulated by outside influences. He had suggested I was no longer capable of managing large sums. He had referenced the guardianship case, conveniently omitting the fact that he lost. The bank froze my accounts as a precaution. "Is this legal?" I asked. The manager sighed. "It's common. Family disputes trigger automatic safeguards." Family disputes. Another gentle phrase for betrayal. By the time I got home, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but fury. I called my lawyer immediately. "This is harassment," he said bluntly, "and it's escalating." That evening, I received an email from Daniel. Subject line, "We need to talk." The message was long, carefully worded, and colder than anything he'd ever sent me. "Mom, you're clearly under stress and not thinking clearly. Rachel and I are worried. We're willing to move past the court issue if you cooperate. We just want to make sure your finances are handled responsibly." Cooperate? I read it 3 times. There was no apology, no remorse, just conditions. I didn't reply. 2 days later, my neighbor knocked on my door. "Margaret," she said gently, "I didn't want to worry you, but there was a woman asking questions about you this morning." My stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "She said she was a friend of your son, asked if you'd been confused lately, if you left the stove on, if you seemed lonely." Rachel. I thanked my neighbor and closed the door slowly. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about control. I called my lawyer again. "We need to go on the offensive," I said. The next week became a blur of documents and decisions. I filed a formal harassment complaint. I sent cease and desist letters. I notified my bank, my doctor, and my financial advisor, putting everything in writing. Most importantly, I rewrote my will. That was the hardest part. I stared at Daniel's name on the page for a long time. I remembered scraped knees, science fair projects, late-night talks after his father died. I cried. Then I removed his name, not out of spite, out of necessity. I allocated my estate to charities that protect seniors from financial abuse. I left small, meaningful gifts to friends who had stood by me. When I signed the final page, my hands were steady. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. The peace ended with a lawsuit. Daniel sued me, not for guardianship, for financial damages. He claimed I had made verbal commitments to support him indefinitely. He argued that withdrawing that support caused emotional distress and financial hardship. Rachel's fingerprints were all over it. The audacity left me breathless. In court, their lawyer painted me as a bitter, unstable woman seeking revenge. Then my attorney stood up. He didn't argue emotions. He presented evidence, texts asking for money, bank statements showing years of transfers, the wedding exclusion, the guardianship attempt, the bank interference. He ended with one sentence that echoed through the room. "Generosity is not a contract." The judge dismissed the case in under 20 minutes. Daniel didn't look at me once. Rachel stared at me with pure hatred. As they walked out, I felt something break and heal at the same time. Months passed. I reclaimed my routines. Morning walks, painting classes, lunch with friends. I even took a short trip, my first alone. I began to understand something profound. I wasn't lonely. I had been isolated. There's a difference. One afternoon, as I watered the plants on my porch, a car pulled up. Daniel stepped out alone, older, thinner. He walked toward me slowly. "Mom, can we talk?" I studied his face. For the first time, I didn't feel obligated. "Yes," I said, "we can talk." He sat across from me, hands clasped. "I messed up," he said. I waited. I let Rachel push things too far. I waited still. I didn't know how to stop it. I took a deep breath. "You knew," I said calmly. "You chose not to." He flinched. "I lost everything," he said. "The apartment, the job. Rachel left." I felt a flicker of sympathy. It didn't move me. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. He looked hopeful. Then I added, "But I won't fix it." His face fell. "I'm not your safety net anymore," I continued. "I'm your mother, and right now the best thing I can do is let you face the consequences of your choices." He stood up slowly. "I thought you'd forgive me," he said. "I have," I replied. "Forgiveness doesn't mean access." He nodded once and walked away. I watched him leave without tears. That evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message appeared. "You think you've won. You haven't." My heart pounded. I knew exactly who it was. Rachel wasn't done, and whatever she was planning next would be her most dangerous move yet. Rachel did not come back loudly. She came back quietly. That should have scared me more. 3 days passed after the anonymous message. No calls, no emails, no legal notices. Just silence. The kind that settles into your bones and makes you listen for footsteps that never come. I told myself it was over. I was wrong. It started with whispers. The first sign came from my church. I had attended the same Sunday service for over 20 years. I knew the faces, the rhythms, the unspoken understanding of belonging. That morning, something felt different. People smiled, but their eyes lingered too long. After the service, a woman I had known for years touched my arm gently. "Margaret," she said, lowering her voice, "are you doing okay?" I frowned. "Of course. Why?" She hesitated. "If you ever need help, you know we're here." Help. That word again. By the time I reached my car, my chest felt tight. That afternoon, I received an email from the community center where I volunteered twice a week. "We've received some concerns and will be temporarily suspending volunteer duties pending review." No explanation, no signature. I sat at my kitchen table, reading it over and over. Concerns. I knew exactly where this was going. The next blow landed 2 days later. A letter arrived from my homeowners association requesting a meeting regarding behavioral complaints. I laughed out loud, a short, humorless sound. Behavioral. I was a 72-year-old woman who watered her plants, baked bread, and went to bed by 10. Still, I went. The meeting room was cold. 3 board members sat across from me, papers neatly stacked. One cleared his throat. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "we've received reports suggesting you may be experiencing emotional distress that's affecting the community." I leaned back in my chair. "From whom?" He avoided my eyes. "That information is confidential." I asked calmly, "Is there any evidence?" He shuffled papers. "No direct incidents, just concerns." I nodded. Concerns were easier to manufacture than facts. That night, my lawyer confirmed it. "She's running a smear campaign," he said. "Subtle, targeted, designed to isolate you." Rachel wasn't attacking my finances anymore. She was attacking my credibility. The next week was worse. A distant relative called to ask if I was confused lately. An old friend canceled lunch without explanation.
A doctor's office requested an unexpected cognitive screening for routine purposes. Rachel was planting the same seed everywhere. Margaret Collins is not well. And people believed it, not because it was true, but because it was convenient. I would have been easier to dismiss than to investigate. For the first time since all this began, I felt tired. Not weak, tired. I sat alone one evening staring at the photo of Richard on the mantel. I did the right thing, I whispered. I needed to believe it. That was when I made a decision that scared me more than anything else. I stopped hiding. The next morning, I called a local journalist. She specialized in human interest stories, quiet injustices, overlooked voices. When she asked why I wanted to speak publicly, I said one sentence: my family tried to erase me. We met at my dining table. I told her everything: the wedding, the money, the guardianship attempt, the lawsuits, the smear campaign. I showed documents, records, court rulings. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said softly, "This happens more than people realize." A week later, the story was published. No names, no accusations, just facts. And suddenly, the whisters changed direction. People started calling again. Friends apologized. Neighbors brought food. The community center reinstated my position with an apology. The homeowners association canceled the complaint.
The narrative shifted. Not confused. Targeted. That night, my phone rang. Rachel. For the first time in months, she called directly. I let it ring. Then she left a voicemail. Her voice was sharp, controlled, furious. "You had no right," she said. "You made me look like a monster." I smiled sadly. She always told on herself. I didn't call back. 2 days later, my lawyer called. "Rachel's employer contacted me," he said. "They're investigating her for falsifying reports related to a private citizen." My heart skipped. "She used company resources," he continued. "She crossed a line." I didn't celebrate. I felt something closer to grief. Rachel didn't just want money. She wanted power. And when she couldn't have it, she burned everything around her. That evening, I found an envelope tucked into my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single document, a photocopy. My signature on a loan agreement I had never signed. My breath caught. The date was from 3 years ago. The amount was significant. My name was perfect. Too perfect. Forgery. Rachel's final card. I sat down slowly, the paper shaking in my hands. If this document surfaced publicly, it wouldn't matter that it was fake. Doubt would be enough. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. His voice was calm but serious. "This," he said, "is her last move." Outside, the sun was setting. I looked around my home, the walls that had held my life, my mistakes, my growth. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Because this time, I wasn't defending myself. I was ending it. I did not sleep that night. The forged document lay on my dining table, neatly aligned, as if it belonged there. My name stared back at me in ink that looked exactly like my own handwriting. Too exact. Forgery always overcompensates. I had learned that from my lawyer years earlier, when Richard and I had helped a friend through a fraud case. Real signatures breathe. Fake ones try too hard. Still, fear has a way of whispering lies. What if people believe it? What if doubt is enough? By morning, I made a decision. I would not wait. My lawyer moved quickly. Within 48 hours, a forensic document examiner was involved. Ink age testing, signature comparison, pressure analysis, every scientific method available. At the same time, my attorney filed a motion documenting a pattern of harassment, retaliation, and falsification, supported by the dismissed guardianship case, the failed lawsuit, the bank interference, and now the forged loan agreement. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a criminal one. Rachel was summoned for questioning, and this time she couldn't talk her way out. The meeting took place in a quiet office downtown. I was not required to attend, but I chose to. Rachel sat on one side of the table, composed but tense. Her confidence, the sharp edge she always carried, was dull now. When the examiner laid out the findings, the room went silent. The signature was forged. The document was backdated. The printer used matched one registered to Rachel's workplace. There was no ambiguity. Rachel's face drained of color. She looked at me then, really looked, for the first time. "You ruined my life," she said through clenched teeth. I didn't raise my voice. "No," I replied calmly. "You ruined your own by trying to steal mine." She was charged with fraud and identity misuse, not because I wanted revenge, because consequences matter. Daniel called me that night. His voice was broken. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear, Mom, I didn't know she did this." I believed him. That didn't change anything. "I know," I said gently, "but you knew enough." He cried. I let him. Then I said the hardest words I had ever spoken as a mother. "I love you, and I'm letting you go." He didn't argue. Somewhere he finally understood. Months passed. The noise faded. The fear loosened its grip. Rachel accepted a plea deal. No prison, but a criminal record, restitution, and the quiet end of her carefully constructed image. I was offered a chance to speak at a local senior advocacy event. I almost said no. Then I remembered the woman at church who had whispered, "Are you okay?" I said yes. Standing at the podium, looking out at a room full of faces, some young, some old, I told my story. Not with bitterness, with clarity. I wasn't abused because I was weak. I was targeted because I was generous. The room was silent. And generosity without boundaries is an open door to exploitation. When I finished, people stood. Not for drama, for recognition. I changed my life in small, meaningful ways. I traveled. I laughed more. I made friends who asked about my day, not my bank account. I framed one final document and hung it in my hallway. Not a court ruling, not a legal victory, a handwritten note to myself. You are not selfish for choosing peace. Daniel sends me birthday cards now. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we don't. That's okay. Love does not require sacrifice of self. It requires honesty. On my 73rd birthday, I sat on my porch as the sun set, the sky painted in soft colors. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who stayed quiet, the one who paid to belong, the one who thought love had to be earned. She did her best, but this woman, the one I am now, finally understands a simple and powerful thing. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. My name is Margaret Collins. I am an American woman, a mother, a widow, a survivor, and the most important thing I ever did was choose myself.